Good evening and welcome to another edition of Fresh Natural Live. I hope your Monday's gone well. We're here in Houston, Texas, and this weekend I had a lot of relatives over because I have a lot of relatives live in Southeast Louisiana, so many of them were had evacuated because of the storm, Hurricane Ida, and so it had been a while since many of us had gotten together, and so I put together an impromptu Hurricane Ida get together, and so I had relatives over, and of course, I prepared food. It was all plant based, and the interesting thing is that many of them, of course, they know my philosophy, so they were anticipating that it would only be plant based food. So many of them had eaten before they came to the event, and so I thought of my situation frequently when I'm going to events when they're serving, the standard American diet foods, and oftentimes, what I do and what the strategy we recommend other people do is eat before you go. And it was interesting to think about the opposite being done for people that ate the standard American diet, come into a place where they were serving only healthy food. So, okay, get your fill in your other things. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But tonight's discussion is going to be on food procurement. And it's one of those topics we lecture on in our healthy lifestyle series. And it's I think, a very important concept because the procurement of food is very important. We all, like to think we eat healthy, and we all try to eat healthy. But one thing we may not think about is the actual procurement of our food. Where does our food come from? How is it grown? What has happened to it before we've eaten it? So if you go back to the very early aspect of your food, how was it grown? How was it, was it harvested in its wild state? Did it grow up in its wild state, or was it cultivated in some manner? If it was cultivated, was it cultivated in a way that was more natural, say in a sustainably grown way or organically grown? Or was it, sprayed with pesticides and various other things, or grown in a nutrient poor soil? So these are the many things that we think about in food procurement. And then, of course, the next phase is, what's happened to it once it's gotten to us. Was it, fried or chemicalized? Because, how long did it stay on the shelf? I mean, we can argue that plant-based foods are the original source or the ideal foods. Then it's okay, great. But then, what has happened to the plant foods once it's gotten to the point of consumption? Because what happens to the food from the point of its origin to the point of its consumption is really important, because one, the nature of the food is important. So we talk about that a lot: vegan, vegetarian, raw, this, that, and the other. But then we need to understand, that point from here to here, where the point of origin to the point of consumption, that food needs to be as close to its natural state as possible for it to be most beneficial for us. And so in that context, we're going to talk about food procurement. And my colleagues and I will be on, and we're going to look at a couple of videos of some other experts talking about different aspects of the food industry and approach it from different angles. And we're going to look at those videos along with you, and we're going to have comments on them. And we're going to take your comments and so on. So, the good news is, the bad news is you won't, see me discuss a PowerPoint presentation, and the good news is you won't see me give a PowerPoint presentation. It depends on your perspective on things. But I think you're going to get a lot of information from this show, and I think it's going to be very important. We're not talking about COVID-19 or COVID-19 vaccines, but there is a relevance to this because everybody's afraid of the vaccine because of what might be in it, what toxins or whatever the case is. And for whatever your beliefs on that is what it is. But, your food has a lot of things in it. And so we need to be, on top of that as much as anything else. So sit tight, get your pen and pencil out. We're going to have a great show for you tonight. And I think you're going to learn something. And of course, before we get started, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, hit the notification button. And of course, give us a thumbs up or like if you feel inclined to do so. That helps this information get out to more and more people. Hello again. Hello, everyone. And again, welcome back to another series of Fresh Natural Live. And we'll be talking about food procurement this evening. I want to first bring on one of my colleagues, Dr. Pamela Atkins. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening. I'm doing great.
Good evening. How's your Monday going?
Going good. Going good.
So we have a number of people in the studio who are interested. Hello, Catherine Welch. She says, good evening. I'm here for what is sure to be a wonderful and provocative discussion. I agree. And so good evening to Karen M. Evans. Hello, Joy 31608. Barbara Curtis. Hello, how are you doing? Nicole and Karen Evans, there you are again. No plant-based hot sausage po' boys? Well, let's think about it. The Relationship Zone, TRZ, Mary McCoy, how are you doing? Barbara Sanders, how are you doing? Let's see here. Barbara Sanders said, I heard the pesticides stop the plants from getting all the sun it needs to be healthy. Okay, we'll talk about that. I don't know that to be, we'll talk about that. Barbara Sanders there again. Cynthia Hammond, yep, I agree. Know what's in your food and everything else, and ear hustler, etc. So anyway, so Pam, what are your thoughts? I mean, does food procurement, and I mean, you've always, been a big proponent, and I know it's always, organically grown stuff, and pesticides. We've had that discussion. You've been a huge component, and we just been joined by Dr. Celeste Palmer. Whoops, she just lost her video. Dr. Palmer?
Yes, hold on.
Okay. I saw you backstage. The video's working fine, but then it
I think I hit. Okay.
Okay. All right, good. So anyway, hello, welcome to the show. How are you doing? How was your day?
It was good.
So I was just talking with Dr. Atkins, and we were talking about, for many years she's been a big advocate of growing food organically and really, discussing this. So let me hear from you first in this context, from the whole aspect of food procurement in terms of where we get our food and that type of thing. What's your take on this whole issue?
Yeah, okay. I thought.
No, go ahead, Dr. Atkins. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've been, I guess, referred to as a purist as far as food, but I think it's really important to have our food security, know where your food comes from, and know how it's been handled. Just because something is non-GMO or whole grain, but it's in a package, things have happened to it before it got into a package, or before it was in the flour form, or even cereal that's whole grain. These are packets, coming in a package that's a concern. What has it come in contact with? The pesticides, the herbicides, etc. And so I think it's so important. It can increase the risk of many cancers and many chronic diseases. And so I think we should be more careful of what our fruit, our vegetables and fruits and grains, where they come from, as well as, meats, people that eat meats. And, we don't, we try to advocate a plant-based diet, but those eating meats, you have to think meats and fish. You have to think about what happens to that before it gets to you as well.
Yeah. First of all, birth happens to that's worse. But anyway, that's when it goes wrong. Dr. Palmer, unmute your mic. Let us know your thoughts on this whole issue of food procurement and where it comes from and so on and so forth.
I think it's a subject that's really a little bit scary when you really start to read and find out what they're doing to our food, the definitions of GMO and definition of organic, USDA organic, and what we think we're eating and what we are actually eating. So, I mean, that's why I advocate for, even though I haven't gotten it to 100% myself, for growing your own, and so you know exactly where it came from, and you're eating clean, because I mean, really we are what we eat. So if we're eating a lot of chemicals, that's what our body becomes, a chemical farm. And the result of that is dis-ease in the body.
Yeah, I agree. And, in this whole era of talking about, coronavirus and the vaccine, and a lot of people are out there saying, well, the vaccine is going to, change your genetics, and it's going to, your arm's going to fall off, and so on and so forth. And we don't have any evidence of that, but the point is that they're concerned about something foreign or unnatural coming into their body. And I remember listening to, I didn't really hear the comedian Chris Rock say this, but I heard somebody, said him saying, so I guess it was hearsay. But anyway, he was quoted as saying, everybody's worried about what's in the vaccine, but, you don't even know what's in Tylenol. And I laughed at that and thought, and so, well, you know what, that's true. And not only that, we don't know what's in a lot of the foods we're eating, the chemical preservatives and the things, and then what goes into the soil that our food grows out of, the chemicals that we spray our soils with, and so on. And so, this whole process, I mean, we're right now in this situation where everyone is, okay, I'm afraid of this, that, and the other. But, I think there's been for a long time, there's been this background of the chemicalization of our planet, our ecosystems, and our bodies. And I want to, although we're talking about the procurement of food, I think that's important. I think that it's important that we, put this in a context of, hey, what happens to our food has a consequence on what happens to us when we eat the food. And there's a lot, that goes into this. This crosses the area of science and health and politics and business, if you will, because, the commercialization of something, brings about the desire for gaining or growing profits. And if you have a food producer whose primary motivation is for profits, then that's going to be a separate motivation than what the intention for food or the fundamental need for food is, which is optimal nutrition and health. So somebody who's producing your food is producing it for the purpose of making more money, then they're going to cut corners that may have an adverse consequence to your health. And so I think we just need to put all this in context and understand that. And so as both of you pointed out, that we should know where our food comes from, even to the extent of growing it ourselves, I think it's really important. And I think doing that has collateral benefits as well.
But can I add something too?
Absolutely.
Just because I think we have to, again, start to take some responsibility. I'm not going to name any places and restaurants, but I think when we go to some of these fast food places, there's no expectation that anything in there is good for us. And nobody thinks that. It's not a secret. We know that it's just purely entertainment food. And so I think it's time for us to recognize that we're doing that, and we're doing it every day, all the time, and take some responsibility to make some changes, because that's what's leading to our depletion in our health.
No, I agree with you. There's a consciousness, a conscious behavior that we have. Dr. Axe, you going to say something?
Yeah, I think, I piggyback on what Dr. Palmer said, that, we feed our children this food, and many times it's out of convenience. We buy things, buy fast food, purchase fast food and everything, that food of that nature. And many in our inner cities and urban communities, many times we feel we're giving nourishment to our children, giving them fast food, hamburger, French fries, fried chicken, Cheetos, and but it's really not quality food and nourishment, and again, and also pregnant women, and breastfeeding women, we need to be more conscious. We push that breastfeeding is so important, but we need to push what you are eating is what the baby's eating. So to eat as clean as possible. I think we shouldn't scare people to say, that we have to grow our own because everybody doesn't have a place to grow, enough space, but maybe get involved, as I said before, more community gardens that grow pesticide free, and there are more popping up everywhere all over the country.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think growing your own is part of the spectrum. You're right. Everybody doesn't have a big plot of land, but, maybe you have a pot, you can grow your herbs and then maybe get something else from somewhere else. So it's kind of part of a spectrum. I like the part about pregnant women. If we all see a pregnant woman, eating, drinking alcohol, we would think badly of her. We saw a pregnant woman smoking a cigarette or smoking a crack pipe, we would think badly of her. But if you saw a pregnant woman eat a burger and French fries, we say she's eating for two. We wouldn't think badly of her. So I think there's a kind of a collective social acceptance of poisoning ourselves, which is part of it. I tell often my patients, I say, my so-called baked chicken heads, I refer to them as, they're addicted to baked chicken. I say, well, as a baked chicken head, your condition is worse than being a crackhead, because at least as a crackhead, people recognize that to be a problem. But as a baked chicken head, they're going to encourage you to eat more. And so, so the part is pretty problematic. But Bev Kelly says that community gardens are wonderful. I'm going to show a slide here. I'm going to go back on my word just a little bit. I got one slide. I couldn't go back. But anyway, but this is a nice slide, so I won't, kill you with it. But I think, both of you made the point about, supporting local gardens and communities. And I want to just show this, slide. Recently, I've been, doing this, and I've been eating plant-based for 18 years, but, it's been a journey for me. And so, now I'm eating raw. But more than that, I'm transitioning to eating more local. I'm going to the farmers market at least once a week, usually twice. And I'm purchasing their sprouts. Our restaurant now have sprouts, especially grown and delivered to us every Tuesday. I'm working on transitioning all of our greens to local growers. So we make that transition. There's a logistical thing, from a business standpoint, in everybody's lives, you have to make these logistical changes, And so some of the things you talk about, the mothers feeding the kids, the fast food in the inner cities, their logistics, they're working, they're busy, they're tired because they're eating fast food. So they don't feel like making, other things. And so it's just convenient for them, et cetera, et cetera. So oftentimes they consciously know it's bad, but they say, I got to give them something, and so on and so forth. And I think I want to get into that debate a little bit, not debate, but discussion a little bit. But I want to say this, to piggyback on the comments that both of you made regarding buying local. And I think it's really important because, when we talk about illicit drugs like cocaine or crack or whatever the case is, people they argue on the supplier side versus the recipient side or the user. And some people are, well, you got to cut off the supply. And other people say, well, you got to cut off the user. And I think both are right, or both have a valid point. But the thing is that on the user side, if you have the users, like if I'm a dope pusher, I'm going to go and get somebody a sample of dope. I mean, the first dose of dope is usually free. And so here, take this, and you get addicted to it. The next time you have to pay for it, then that feeds that dope dealing economy, And so, the more people drink, the smoke dope, the more money the dope makers make. And so you can make a similar argument that, if you, smoke dope or use dope, then you're feeding in and supporting the dope producing community. So if you want to eat bad food, eat junk food and trash food, then those fast food places make more money and they just make more fast food. If we eat less fast food and less junk food, then they say, we're not making money. Oh, everybody's eating natural food, so we better make salads or something. So we can have an impact on our economies. What we have to do is work on our local, most local self is ourselves and our own addiction. But the reason for this slide is the following. When we start to do things like consume healthier foods in local places, a lot of people say, oh, healthy food is too expensive. I don't agree with that, but that's another story. But what we do is that, when I buy the first 5 heads of lettuce or whatever the case is from a local grower, then that gives them money to maybe grow more lettuce or whatever the case is. And the more we do that, we stimulate the local economies. Then, if we go to the farmers markets, there are more booths out there. I was at a local farmers market, and Aisha Snow wants to know which farmers market I go to. I go to the one over on Stella Link, which is not far from my office. And it's called, what's the name of that farmers market? So that's, remember? Anyway, so
it's called Braeswood or something, Bayou, something like that.
Yeah, Braeswood Farmers Market or Bayou Farmers Market. So that's a good one. There's one over in River Oaks. And there are a number of good farmers market in Houston. I plan to go visit more of them. But the point is that when we start to support these growers and the people at the booth, and they make more money, their economies grow, and they're able to produce more of this ideal healthy food. And when they're able to produce more, then more of it's available. Then they may be able to, they get, a little bit larger economies of scale. They can maybe make their prices better, but it makes it more available for us. If I don't go buy the raw sprouts or greens or whatever the case is, then that person says, well, I can't make it anymore. I'll go and, sell, fried chicken. I don't know. But the point is that, we want to support the local economies, preserve farmland, rural, because if they're not growing things naturally, whatever piece of ground they're farming on, they're preserving that ground and that local economy. So what we do in our individual lives, how we spend what we buy, has, I think, a big impact locally, and that can actually spread to a greater extent. So I thought I'd just sort of share this little slide, which sort of, demonstrates that. But I'll try not to bombard you with too much of the PowerPoints tonight. But yeah, that's my thing. Any other thoughts on farmers markets or buying local? Y'all made a great point of that earlier.
I have something else that I tell my patients oftentimes, but a lot of times when I'm saying it, I want the parents to understand the benefit of eating locally is that we are taking in the local pollens into our body from the local produce, or the fruits and vegetables. And local can be kind of subjective. So we want something that's from somewhere in the state. And I know we can't do that with every food, but with some of them. So when you take in the local pollen, then your body equilibrates and balances to the environment that you're in. So example, if you travel to another state or another country, you eat some of the local food, you're breathing in the local pollen, so your body can balance out and equilibrate. That way you don't get the allergy, because I get a lot of kids now who have a lot of issues with allergies and asthma, and they just, when the season change and the pollen is released, they flare. And I find that if they get in some local food, and some people do kind of a cheat with pollen, but you don't have to do it with pollen. You can do it with just eating food. It will help to, and it takes time, it will help to balance out the system so you don't have all of these allergies and inflammation during the seasonal change.
Okay, so the local growing helps from an allergy standpoint as well. Is what you're
yeah, as well. I mean, it does many things, but just, on a relatable plane where people are suffering with allergies, because every allergy season the kids come in and the adults and they're like, oh, it's my allergies. And it shouldn't, that's not normal. I think a lot of people think it's normal because so many people are suffering with it, but that's not normal. And usually it's because they're not eating any fresh, it has to be fresh fruits and vegetables. It can't be cooked fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Did any of y'all know about this Walmart? Beth Kelly's on this Walmart 20-pound bag of soil, cut it open, seeds. Beth, can you give us more details on that? Apparently there's some bag you can get from Walmart with soil in it. She opens it up, throws some seeds in it, it grows a bunch of lettuce. I need to find this.
Well, we also want to be careful of what soil we use. We want to make sure we use soil that is not tainted and more organic too. So we want to make good choices. Piggybacking on community markets, we we can talk to persons that represent the farms or the growers and ask questions. Do you grow with pesticides? Do you use herbicides? Do you use Roundup? And ask things like that. And that's helpful to have that information. And also we lower our carbon footprint by not needing to transport foods from so far. Like our groceries, many times produce comes from quite a distance, sometimes even from South America or Australia or something like where there's a different climate.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if it comes from too far away, like you said, there's a whole issue of the carbon footprint. And then if it's coming from a different climate, then, you know, it's not in the environment you're living in. You know, the allergic aspect of it, as Dr. Palmer mentioned, could throw things off. So there's a lot of health benefits in just the whole exercise of eating local. And so knowing where your food comes. I like the idea of talking to the growers, because, I mean, that's really important, because oftentimes, you know, at our restaurant, we have a food distributor. You know, sometimes we ask, well, where does this come from? And so I have to go and check. I don't know. Often they don't know where it came from, let alone how it was grown. And so if you know the person who's actually, you know, putting the seeds in the soil, that can make a big difference in terms of understanding what can happen and so on. So I think that's something that's important.
I think Empress on the Throne, she said something that I ran into a lot with going to farmers markets about they're oftentimes buying and reselling. And at the farmers market, you can ask them, you know, like you said, you can talk to them and ask them, where is the food sourced from? And so I was disappointed by that. And that's my whole motivation to start trying to grow something myself, because not that I necessarily wanted to or had time to do that, but a lot of the farmers markets now, it didn't used to be like this, but a lot of them are purchasing from somebody else who's growing it conventional and reselling.
Yeah, that's and Mary McCoy, I haven't thought to ask Salata where the foods are coming from. You know, it gets us into that whole realm of what we're comfortable doing. And I alluded to the whole aspects of, you know, grocery stores and all. And, you know, I don't know. I would imagine at some point, long time ago, some farmers probably were sitting around talking about, boy, it's going to be really bad. You know, they're going to stop growing their food, and most people move to the cities and having to get food from supermarkets or whatever. And I don't know, someone may have had that conversation before, but here we are living in a situation where, you know, most of our food comes from institutions. Now Mary McCoy says, well, she don't ask Salata where their food comes from, but, you know, supermarket X, Y, or Z, you know, they're getting their food from a lot of different places. And when we talk on a healthy lifestyle series, we go into some of the nuances of, you know, what happens to this food, because a lot of times it's put on the shelf for long periods of time. Some foods are gas preserved, they're frozen and thawed, and they're harvested too early. You already mentioned the fact that coming from different regions that are outside our region. So there's a lot that happens to the food. So you look at that beautiful produce in the supermarket, say, okay, I'm gonna eat raw, plant foods, and it's like, okay, great, but, you know, what happened to that stuff? And so I think the institutionalization of our food is a concept that we have to consider in the context of, you know, what we get. So, and I don't want to, you know, get, you know, sound like too much of a purist, but if your food's been institutionalized, in other words, if you are hiring some employers and you say, well, you have a criminal background, guys who I spend, 10 years in the big house, he's been institutionalized. Now, granted, we don't want to, speak negatively of that, but you're going to say, well, something happened in your life that I need to take a close look at in the context of hiring you. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to hire you because you've been to the big house, quote unquote. But I'm going to, look and see, well, what was the reason and have you recovered and so on. Similarly with our food. we may not say, well, I'm not going to buy anything that's been in the supermarket because it's institutionalized. But I think we need to look at that and say, well, look, food that comes through here may have been processed in a certain way that's not optimal. Well, now supermarkets have a lot of good stuff in it, but they have a lot of bad stuff in it. And so I think when we go to these places, whether it's a supermarket XYZ or a restaurant XYZ, especially know that large chain places, we need to try to get an understanding for where that food comes from and what's done to that food before we consume it. Any other thoughts along those lines, especially groceries? I've become very. I'm trying to wean myself away from relying mostly on the grocery store. It's a convenience. It's a convenience we've all grown up in, even in the so-called health food stores. But we have to check ourselves and say, well, wait a minute, how much of what I'm consuming comes from this institutionalized place, and do I need to start to make a transition? And my answer to that, hypothetical question rhetorical question rather is yes. I think we should all transition to where we're eating more and more natural food. That doesn't mean you all have to get out and grow a big garden or farm tomorrow. But I think what you need to do is, in your mind, at least strategize how you can start to eat, even if it's once a week, once a month, start to eat something that's grown locally in your back porch, in your backyard, and then build from there. And wherever that process takes you. And granted, you may be too busy to do things, and you may have to make adjustments in your life, or divert resources to get somebody to help you grow something in your backyard or your back porch or whatever. But whatever your strategy needs to be, I think it starts from a consciousness of saying, I need to move in this direction. Now, the exact steps I take, et cetera, is another matter. But once you consciously make the determination and dedicate yourself to move in the direction of eating more natural stuff and things that are more procured from a more local and natural environment, I think the better off you'll be.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, most of us shop at grocery stores, and I guess the convenience, and many times we have advocated to get grocery stores and fresh food in the neighborhood. Some of the urban areas, many times all we had is like convenience stores with very little produce. But if we shop in grocery stores, I just encourage my patients to try to get more organic, which is more expensive, so that will drive you more to community gardens, but also to shop the perimeter more and shop, and not to shop the interior where all the boxed, canned, and processed food is. But I once saw a diagram, and it's like, I think there's like 3 or 4 companies that, own most of the processed foods and the packaged foods we eat, and it's a monopoly. And it's amazing, how, companies like Nabisco and Kellogg's and things like all these companies, but there's like 3 or 4 major companies that own most of these companies, these grocery store processed food companies. And but we just have to know that it is things have happened to it. And I didn't know if you were going to show any videos or anything about that, but we can get into some of the things that are in food.
Yeah, yes, I'm going to. I've got a couple queued up, and
Okay.
I think it would be a good time to actually get into it. Dr. Palmer, you have any other comments on this?
I was just going to add that this is a great topic area that children would love to be involved in and growing, get a little pot. And like the people in the chat are talking about, let the children grow a little something, or some herbs. And once they grow it and they see how it grows and they touch the earth underneath it, they are interested in eating it. It's weird, I know, but a lot of times they will eat things if they see the process versus you just giving it to them on a plate. So, that's something to start now with children, because that sets the background of the foundation for future. They've never seen, a lot of children don't know, sometimes even a lot of adults don't know what broccoli looks like. For example, a whole broccoli plant looks like in its form, because I had broccoli in my garden, and one of my friend's mother said, "Well, what is that?" I said, "That's broccoli," because the stalk is just one small piece on the plant. Now, of course, what we see in the grocery store is like a gigantic blow up of what your plant will probably look like. But, at least you know what certain plants are supposed to look like. And then you make your choice as to how big you want to buy something or how small you want to buy something. Because nowadays things in the grocery store are everything is supersized.
Yeah, for sure. A quick answer to Karen Evans about where she gets soil. I mean, I think you can Google it. There's some places in the Houston area you can get it, but I don't know where you're coming from, but certainly if I would just Google natural soil, I would imagine places that sell it have websites.
And somebody put in that you probably haven't gotten down about composting yourself. Somebody put that
that's right. Yeah, I saw it. Composting is actually a good way to sort of improve your soil. So start with what you have, and if you compost, that you're right. That's a good part. Let's see, maybe a vendor of your local farmers market might know a place to buy clean soil. That's good. Good point. If you're supporting these people, they probably know sources of good soil. And then there's a comment about composting as well.
And also, I mean, once you get into that world, I think things will open up. I know people who get soil from somewhere up on horse farms. So there are people who sell their horse manure and to farmers and to people who have gardens at depending on how much you want and how much you need. So I mean, it's available.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So there's a lot of sources and that. Let's get into some of the couple of videos that I showed. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a short break, and then we're going to get into a couple of videos because the two videos they're only a few minutes long, and we're going to comment on it. But I want to give our customers a take on what happens. And these are some authors of books, and these are guys who work in relevant fields. One's a doctor, and the other, I'm not sure if he's a doctor or not, but he may be a lawyer. But he talks about litigation with some of the big food industries. Let's take a quick break. We'll get back.